Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Youth Rights Podcast. I am your host, Zane Miller, and today we are going to be talking about hotel booking age discrimination and the way that hotels put restrictions on youth trying to get rooms. We are here with NYRA volunteer Kelsey, Duskie. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I am Kelsey. I'm currently a student at University of North Texas, and I'm a volunteer member at NYRA.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of research on hotel booking age specifically, and it actually started like because I didn't even realize that this was as big of a deal with age discrimination. Was I saw this tweet actually. I want to put it up on screen, but I want to read it. This guy says he gets on Twitter and he says my 20-year-old son who turns 21 next month was driving home to Indiana from Florida today on a grueling 19-hour road trip. But guess what? Not a single hotel at Marriott or Hilton hotels in northern Florida or Georgia along the I-75 would check him in to sleep for the night. Even though I offered to prepay with my credit card on the phone, they refused, citing company policy that prohibits anyone under 21 from checking in without an adult with them. So that's really interesting of like you could be like a 20-year-old on a road trip, and like obviously like road trips would be some like independent road trips without like older adults with you. That would be things that like 18, 19, 20-year-olds would do. That's like a normal thing. But you can't get a room at a lot of hotels without like a parent there. And that got me just into thinking about doing the research on this. And when I was doing the research, I found that a lot of the hotels, the way they enforce the policies is really interesting to where like the policies isn't at the website level. So they don't check like your ID, they don't verify your age when you book it. So you can book it, you can pay for it in advance, and then they only check your age when you go to check into the hotel. So you go there, you'd be a 20-year-old who bought a room, you booked a room, you reserved it online, you get to the hotel, and then, you tell them like you're 20 years old and everything, and they're like, oh, minimum age 21, you're out, and we're not giving you a refund. So I feel like that in and of itself is just a very discriminatory nature, especially based on age, of the way these hotels treat young people. And it's kind of like a predatory business practice of like, you can pay for something, and then if like you just didn't check the policy online, you can go to check into your room, and then like you're kind of screwed. You're screwed out of luck. Let's say you flew from like Texas to New York. You're in New York. You go to your hotel room that you booked. You can't check in because you're under 21. Then what do you do in that point? These are the big concerns that I have with hotel booking age.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting how it's adults that they're bringing this against. It's like one thing, it's a whole another argument with minors because like liability issues, but for adults over 18 and above is considered an adult legally.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying you have to have an adult with you when you're already an adult.
Yeah.
You have to have like the specific age range. It's ridiculous, frankly, because they're just blatantly discriminating against like a specific age group. You might need to go to a hotel to spend the night somewhere. Like it could potentially be a necessity. It's that, or like maybe sleeping like outside, or I mean, I don't know would this apply with like motels too, or
I didn't specifically do a lot of research into motels. I think they're a bit more lax, but also I think a lot of them don't let you like book in advance. Motels are usually you just kind of roll up. So like that's kind of you don't really know. You don't really know what you're getting into with that. And also they're kind of a little low quality. Motels usually aren't as safe as hotels, so it's like I mean you know like how motels are like more likely to like crime and stuff happening there, so not really as safe. And it is a safety concern. That's what I would say too, because like the instance that I described from what this person was talking about, like this like 20-year-old is on a road trip, 19-hour road trip. He can't stop like somewhere. He can't like get a hotel because not a single one in the area would let him stay. So then what are his options? His options are either one of two things. It's either you continue driving on no sleep to get to your location, or you like stop somewhere and you like sleep in your car. So either way, safety concern, because either you're impaired driving or you're having to sleep in your car where it's like, who knows what could happen to you. That's not really the safest situation. Like if you're in a parking lot, sometimes like police will like try to, they don't even want people doing that. Like they think it's like, sometimes they'll consider it like loitering and stuff. Or like, if there's like, if it's a bad area, it's a bad neighborhood, like people could come at you like a criminal or something. So either way, it's a safety concern, especially for these situations where people don't have another option of where they're going to go.
for sure. Because if you, it's like, and yeah, like they're lesser than options, but they could be very dangerous. They could, in police situations, they could get you arrested for, or they could tow your car.
Yeah.
For if you're like sleeping in your car. And then motels have like incredibly high rates of human trafficking and things like that. It's a danger thing. And I guess going to a hotel is a privilege in a sense, but it's something the situation that you're describing with the tweet, it's kind of a necessity for him, the safest option. Because you keep driving, you probably will fall asleep and crash. That happened to my uncle. He tried to pull through an all-nighter, and then he crashed his car into a ditch.
Wow.
And because he fell asleep at the wheel, and it happens. That's why it's important to be able to like stop during road trips to sleep and stuff like that. So it's going to increase this range of people for going through road trips just like without sleep, which is incredibly dangerous for the roads already. But it's also going to give like a worse rep to that kind of like a worse reputation. It like, especially when I'm thinking of like driving, there's a bad reputation already with like crashing and stuff, and now it's going to cause more crashes because these people are just going to be encouraged to keep driving through it. And I guess it's going to be a small number of people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter, but like it's still crossing my mind here.
Yeah, like you mentioned about the bad rap, because like, yeah, there's already a negative stereotype around young people specifically, like being bad drivers. And it's like insurance companies will jack up the rates of young drivers, like, because they think they're more likely to get in crashed and stuff. And it's like, yeah, young drivers, they're newer to driving. So, they probably wouldn't be as experienced. But when there's literally policies that are like working against them for certain things, it's like, if you can't get a hotel, you're going to try to power through the drive, and then, then you'd be more likely to crash. And then it's like, oh yeah, they get that stereotype of, oh yeah, these young drivers, they don't know how to drive. But, well, you're impaired because you can't get a hotel because you can't sleep for the night. And yeah, like you said, that's a small number of cases, but all of the things kind of connect with each other of there's policies working against young people being able to do certain things. And yeah, I think it really is a safety concern. And one of the other safety concerns that I think for this, for the hotel booking age in particular, is a lot of the times people use hotels as temporary housing. Like if they're not like going on trips and stuff, they use it as temporary housing if they're like escaping the current home that they're in. Let's say like you're living in a home, like an instance of like domestic abuse or something happens, maybe not to the level that like you'd call the police and get a report. Maybe it's not like physical yet, but it's like it's a toxic environment. Like the people around you are toxic. You don't feel safe. Like you feel like your safety's threatened, even if something hadn't happened yet. You want to prevent that. So you want to get out. And it's like if you don't have like a relative nearby that you can just go to their house and just stay in their home, you're going to go to a hotel because that's somewhere you can stay the night that's safe. But like if you're a young person, this applies to minors too, and not just young adults. Like let's say a kid is in their home and it's not safe. They want to go to a different home. So then they go to like a hotel or something, but they can't get a room. It's like this would apply to young adults. This would apply to like minors too. So that I feel like that's a big issue of it's kind of cutting off this what should be very easily accessible emergency temporary housing for people.
For sure, and it's making me think of like personal autonomy and freedom of movement, which is the thing that a lot of these issues come back to. Young people just don't have the same freedom of movement and like personal autonomy that people above the age of like 25 have. I mean, you can't rent a car, which is not the biggest thing in the world. It's not always a necessity to rent a car, but it's just there's a bunch of things limiting movement. If you are stuck somewhere and you don't have a place to go, you don't have a friend you can spend the night with, or you don't have family you can spend the night with. Young people, if they're like in a bad situation, they're stuck with maybe in a dangerous situation with their home, but it's not something they necessarily want to report to the police, or it's not necessarily something that is obviously terrible or something that police will even do anything about, but it's just something they need to get out. They don't have friends or family they can go spend the night with. Going to a hotel might be their best option, especially if they have the money to do it. But if you're from 18 to 21, that's not an option for you to do. It's putting these people in more danger than they need to be.
Yeah, and especially the age group that it's targeting. Because if you're under 21, you're going to be less likely to be living on your own. Like, you're going to be more likely to be having to live with like parents or something like that, where, let's say if you're living in a toxic home environment, then like, what can you do to get out of that? Like, if you don't, like, people under that age are less likely to have a car. They could even, like, in some cases, just try to walk to the closest place that's there. Like, they could have like, oh, grandma's house like you go to that's 30 minutes away, but they can't drive there. And then if there's a hotel like only like a little bit down the street, maybe they'll try to hit that. But if the booking age, they can't stay it there. And, it's really interesting for, these safety issues that young people would be facing, because when you think about it, when it comes to young people, like, usually people say, okay, if you're in an abusive situation as a young person, just, you should just call the police, get it reported to like CPS or whatever, which works for some situations, but not always. I just did a whole webpage about like failures of CPS to intervene. And there were so many circumstances where an abusive situation that a kid was in was reported, and then CPS either failed to intervene, didn't remove them from the home, or removed them from the home temporarily and then brought them back to the abusive home. Each time led to the kid either being abused or injured, or even in some circumstances killed. I interviewed someone on the podcast a while ago who talked about her personal situation where she was living in a home with multiple siblings where her parents were constantly in instances of domestic violence, drug abuse, stuff like that, and it wasn't a safe home. She called the police. She had to leave the home, call the police on multiple occasions to report it. The police just talked to the parents and then sent her back to go live with her parents. So, it kind of goes back to that thing of you can't rely on, like, if you're trying to get out of the situation, like leave, you can't just rely on, oh yeah, the police will help me, the child protective services will help me, because they won't always do that. So then it gets back to, oh, maybe the hotel is the safest option, or just a temporary living situation. But when you think about it, so if a young person doesn't feel safe in their home and they can't get a hotel because of hotel booking age policies, where are they forced to go? Like the streets. So think about how dangerous it would be for a young person to be on the streets.
It's an unfortunate reality, and if safety is an option for you, it's something you should always take, and they're eliminating that option for people. Especially, I'm thinking, like, for a lot of situations, sometimes you just need one night for it to get a little better, and then it's livable again.
Yeah.
Like, not saying that's an ideal situation to live in, but if you're 18 years old, you're trying to save money to get out of an abusive situation, but it's maybe not, you're not in danger, your life isn't in danger. Sometimes one really bad fight can put your life in danger, and going away for just one night could save your life. But people are getting dissuaded from doing that because there's not options that are safe. You could be beat, or you could be left on the streets, or left to go in like an unsafe environment. But you're left with only unsafe options with this policy.
My stepdad was very, very emotionally abusive. Wasn't physically abusive, but he would get to the point where you felt like it would have turned into that. And there has been a few circumstances I can count on one hand where my mom took me and my sister to a hotel just to stay for one night after like a really big fight. You didn't know what happened. My stepdad was drunk. Like, he could have gotten violent if we weren't out of the situation. We don't know. But so the hotel, we just went to a hotel for one night. We stayed there. Things cooled off by the morning, and we can go back to the house. But like, let's say like a young person, like a 20-year-old, 19-year-old, 18-year-old, they're in that type of situation with like an abusive spouse. They don't have that option. They can't do that. And then also if like a minor is in a situation where like they're living with their parents are like maybe drunk or something, a big fight just happened, they don't feel safe. They can't just go to like a hotel because the booking age policies. And, if they don't have a vehicle, they can't like go to another relative's home. And even if they do have a vehicle, if the parents are being directly abusive, like with certain runaway laws, like if certain states have harboring a runaway charges, to where if you go, like let's say your parents are being abused something, if you go to grandma's house without parents' consent, the parents can call the police on the grandmother and be like, they're harboring a runaway, and the grandmother can get arrested for that. So young people really they just don't have an escape. Like you go out, you leave the home, you go to a different person's house, they can get arrested for harboring a runaway. You can't go to a hotel because the booking age policies. If you go to a motel, not really safe, then you're just left with what? Either being in the abusive home or being on the streets, where God knows what could happen to you on the streets. Like, it's really bad because of the fact that there isn't like a safe option. I mean, even reporting it to like CPS or the police, like a lot of the times they don't do anything about it if it's not like to that level where they directly intervene. So at that point, it's like, what do? They don't really have a safe alternative. And that's why I think when people act like hotel booking age policies aren't the biggest deal, I mean, when it comes down to these safety concerns, I feel like they really are. This is such a real issue.
It is an issue. I'm also thinking about, I've had friends who get kicked out of their houses, but it's only for like 1 or 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're able to come back. Like their parents are over whatever kind of episode they're having. Maybe they have parents with like mental illness that have like an episode and they start doing like bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes CPS doesn't care about the situation, but also even if CPS is able to do something about the situation, sometimes the options that CPS provides are not options that are good or safe for the people. You can be put in foster care, which has a plethora of issues, and that's for a whole separate conversation, because our foster care system is so corrupt and terrible right now and unsafe. And that's not an option that a lot of these kids want. And also, if you're an older teen, you probably are in a really tricky situation. If you really love your parents, you don't want to leave them. They provide for you, and they have their good moments. They can just be bad sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, you'll leave once you're 18. Once you have the accessibility to leave, maybe you will leave. But sometimes you just need that 1 or 2 nights, maybe even a week, just to get out, let it cool down, let your home become a safe place to retreat to again. Go to a hotel or something. But now, no safe option. And while I understand the liability concerns with like minors and stuff, but I think older teens should definitely be allowed to.
Yeah.
And if your parents are doing awful things, or your parents kicked you out for whatever reason, and maybe they'll want you back tomorrow, but they don't want you there tonight, and you don't have anybody you can go to, that's your best option. That's the safest option out there. You don't want a 16-year-old girl going to a sketchy motel in an even more dangerous situation than she possibly could have been in before.
Yeah.
And her life is ruined and all this stuff, etc., etc. But when a hotel is a completely safe alternative that should be accessible to these people, it's completely, like, it's negating any type of safety at all for young people. It's trying to put them in dangerous situations to keep some layer of control. I don't know what the reasoning would be, honestly.
Like, there is a liability concern with minors, but I feel like, that's kind of a reason of why the hotels do it, of, these certain liability concerns, like minors can, like, contracts aren't legally binding to an extent with minors. But I feel like that is more of a symptom of, like, a bigger issue rather than, like, the hotel, like, that's like, oh yeah, this is why they do it. But I feel like that should actually be evidence of why we need that system to change, or why we need to make it to where minors should actually have more legal autonomy to, engage in contracts with like businesses and stuff. And a lot of times, there's that negative stereotype around young people about, oh, they're irresponsible, they're destructive, blah, 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 blah. So there's been a lot of instances where hotels will like have, like, even if they do let people like 18 to 21 stay, they'll have like younger. I think there was one where the minimum age to book a room was 21. But then they had like a young adult surcharge for anyone 21 to 24. So you had to pay extra money and like a deposit if you were young, to cover like potential damages. And there's another one to where to go to a hotel, you have to sign a waiver saying your parents are legally liable for all of the damages if you do any damages. And so that's usually the reason. I mean, there's certain hotels that the minimum booking age is 25. Like, there's even some like that. So I feel like it perpetuates this negative stereotype of like, oh yeah, young people are this, young people are that. But I feel like, in my opinion, if a young person is traveling on their own, like without another adult, like without their parents, without other adults with them, and they're they're staying in a hotel because they're traveling somewhere independently, they're the type of person that's more likely to be more responsible and less likely to like cause damage to a hotel. Because if you have like the independence and the responsibility to literally travel on your own without any adults or like older adults, you're probably going to be responsible enough to not like trash a hotel room. I mean, that's my opinion on it. I just feel like these two traits go hand in hand.
And then here's my other thing. If you cause damages, this is a common hotel policy. Or with renting a car or anything like that, any kind of renting or borrowing of or staying in a place using resources, it's common knowledge that if you damage the resources, you have to pay for them.
Exactly.
What's the difference if someone's like 18 and they go somewhere and they damage something? They still have to pay it. They're still legally bound to pay for it, just like anyone else. Like, they're acting like they're not legally bound. That's my thing. It's kind of ridiculous to be like, yeah, this is more common, but it's still like any problems that will happen are still going to be fixed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're still going to get the compensation necessary for any problem that happens to have it fixed and all that. And I get it could be a nuisance, but it's really, I don't think the issue is as prevalent as people seem to like persuade it as. And I think it's like also an issue of media likes to act like young people are like super like, you're watching TV show, they act like super destructive and stuff. Most teenagers aren't like that.
Yeah.
It can be a little reckless and impulsive, but you're not doing crazy things. You're not like beating up random people. You're not doing all this like horrible stuff. That's not like the average person. The average person's just like normal like the rest of us. And I don't think that they're going to trash a hotel room to like absolute shreds to the point that's like unsavable. If they do a little damage, then they pay for that damage. But I just don't think that it's as common as like media likes to portray it as like that they will do all this destructive stuff. We have like a media trying to like push this narrative that young people are so destructive and like irresponsible and unable to do certain tasks. And by pushing this narrative, we're limiting youth rights, and we're keeping it always goes back to keeping the power in the older generation. The older generation has the power, and they're trying to keep the power with them by limiting the autonomy, freedom of movement, education of young people, and giving like limiting their personal rights and personal abilities.
Yeah, for sure. And that exact issue is something that I talked about in this other podcast about like colonialism's impact on youth rights. And I feel like what happens a lot of the time that's been happening for the last like 100 so years is young people have kind of almost been put into this like social segregation of like, okay, there's the young people's world and then like the adult world, or like people like the real world. That's what they say. Oh, when you go into the real world, like that's how they put it. And then they're enforcing this in a lot of different ways of like business bans is a big thing. They make it to where like, oh yeah, people under like 18 aren't even allowed to go into this business without an adult or something. Like certain malls make it to where unsupervised minors aren't even allowed in them. Curfew laws to where if you're younger than a certain age, you're not even allowed to be outside, like out of the house after a certain time of night. There's ways of, putting young people in this like type of social segregation, and also like a cultural aspect about it. And I've talked about this before, where people are like, a lot of people are under this cultural aspect that they feel like adults interacting with minors in any capacity, even if there's completely nothing wrong with it, they act like adults interacting with minors are like inherently predatory. Like I've seen that a lot, to where it's like, oh, if I'm like an 18-year-old and I have a friend who's like 15, someone will like hear that and then like they'll think that's weird. They'll think there's like something wrong with that. They'll be like, oh, that's like predatory. That's like weird. You shouldn't like have a friend that's like younger than you or something. Because they just assume that like any adult minor connection is somehow like tied to pedophilia or something. It's an issue because of what you said about the media fear mongering. Because when you look at media, teenagers are portrayed as like unruly, like brats, like people who cause problems, like delinquents, right? So if adults aren't interacting with teenagers because of the type of social segregation that we have, like their opinions of teenagers are based on what they see in the media. So it makes it to where it empowers this idea for them to then be like, oh yeah, we should have curfews. Oh yeah, teenagers should be banned from going to these businesses. Yeah, teenagers shouldn't be allowed to book hotel rooms. Teenagers, like young people, shouldn't be allowed to rent a car and stuff like that. Because like, oh, they're destructive. They'll do all these terrible things because, that's just how they are. And then their basis for that is based on like what you see on like the news or like what movies and like shows and stuff, like based on stereotypes, basically. Or like news blasting out the worst stories of like, oh, these teenagers robbed a car. And everyone's like, oh my God, all teenagers are going to go rob cars. When realistically, 99.9% of teenagers have never even thought of robbing a car.
Yeah. It really is. It's a way of keeping everything separated so that I really think it goes back to so the people who have the power now can keep the power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's why everything has gotten so much older as we've gotten, because it's the people who are at the top want to stay at the top for as long as possible. It's the same thing that we see in elections. It's the minimum age is 35 for most positions.
For 35 for
president.
35 for president, 30 for senator, and then 25 for representative.
And I'm thinking it's eliminating whole groups of people who are unable to be represented, because you're representing these older people. And okay, it's one thing if it's a 35-year-old running kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not mostly seeing people in their 30s run. You're usually seeing people in their 40s, 50s, 60s run.
70s, 80s.
We're eliminating the ability of young people to even access certain spaces. And I mean, I know it's a big stretch from going from like, oh, you can't access a hotel, you can't rent a car. But it's these basic things that we think we're, as a society, are like just accepting as okay for us to eliminate access to for a group of people. And we eliminate access to that. And then once we eliminate one thing, it's kind of just a snowball effect of, well, we can eliminate this. This isn't something they can do. This is something they're not trustworthy with. They're not trustworthy with that. They're not trustworthy with this. And it just keeps going, keeps going. If you think about it in the greater scheme of things, eliminating one more thing is just showing the greater population that, oh yeah, it's okay. These people don't need access to these things because they're going to destroy it. They're going to do something bad. Yeah. So let's eliminate this. Let's eliminate that. Let's make sure that they don't have access to the basic things that the majority of people over the age of 25 do.
For sure. And it really comes back to like what you said about the voting, the representation, is it empowers people to be able to do. Like it empowers, like when young people don't have representation, it empowers politicians to allow these things to occur. Like, for example, there was actually a situation in New Hampshire where New Hampshire then specifically put an enactment of a statute that said nothing in this subdivision shall prohibit a hotel, motel, or other lodging establishment held out to transient guests for public accommodations from having policies denying or refusing rental agreements with guests under 21 years of age. So in response to that, literally a law is specifically put in place to say you are allowed to discriminate. You are allowed to, which is just insane, because it's saying that like, oh yeah, discrimination is bad, but discrimination only exists in any other way except for age. It's ridiculous. If politicians are all old, they're not going to care about the issues that young people are facing. They'll be like, oh yeah, they're not allowed to rent a hotel. Psh, who cares? And then it gets to the point where like we saw in Idaho, which I wrote a whole blog about this, young people aren't even allowed to access the suicide hotline without a parent's consent. And it's like, it starts with this, it goes to this, it goes to this, it goes to this, it goes to this. And they ignore the issues that young people face. Like they ignore everything we've been talking about like, if you're trying to escape an unsafe situation, if you're on a road trip and, could be impaired driving because you can't find a place to rest. Like all these things, they'll ignore those because they don't care about the issues that young people face and they don't feel like it's a valid problem.
And obviously we're not going to have any, like you said, we're not going to have anyone in power listen when they're all too old to possibly understand that this is an issue. They don't care about it. It's not something that affects them. Even if they have kids, they think lowly of their kids. They think lowly of the abilities they have, their self-control, their impulse control, their destructive nature, things like that. There's this perpetuation of the stereotype that there's this destructive nature of young people that you just magically grow out of at 25, 35, things like that. Maybe it seems like a small issue, even though it's not really, if they're putting themselves in danger and it could be a risk to their life or their physical safety. While emotional safety is also really important and it could be a risk to that as well, but it's definitely a risk to their physical safety for this.
But also you mentioned earlier how, they really focus on this liability thing being the concern, but there's instances where certain hotels actually like don't even care about the liability and they actually are inputting these policies just to have like adult and parental control over young people. And this one specific hotel that I want to bring up, there's this hotel called Midtown West Hotel in New York City, where like I said, most of the policies for young people revolve around, oh yeah, we need an adult to like take liability for this, or we need like a surcharge deposit because of the liability. Always goes back to that liability that they think young people are more incompetent or like more destructive, blah, blah, blah. But this one is interesting because it specifically says, I'm going to read out the policy word for word. Guests under 21 years of age require a parental consent form at check-in. Please note that without parent or guardian consent, check-in is not allowed and payments for reservation will not be refunded. So they're basically saying that you need to have a parent consent to you being able to check into the hotel room, which is ridiculous for so many reasons. But reason number one, there's a whole laundry list, but reason number one is it's perpetuating this idea that young people, even adults, like legal adults, should still be bound to their parents, which is ridiculous because like if you're 18, 19, 20, like, and you grew up with parents who like maybe were manipulative, maybe were overbearing, maybe were like controlling, maybe were abusive, you don't want to have anything to do with them. Like you want to be done. You don't want to have to rely on them. You're an adult. You shouldn't have to rely on them. But then it's like, oh yeah, you can't even go visit New York City and book a room at this hotel without their consent. It's like you're a grown adult. Why would you need your parents' consent to be able to do that? And like it's perpetuating this thing of like that young people are like somehow like bound and like kind of like property of your parents, that even when you're an adult, you have to rely on your parents to have privileges, like adult privileges, which doesn't make any sense because that just shouldn't be the way things are with that.
Mm-hmm. And then it might sound silly, but what about the orphans? I mean, things like that. There are people who lose their parents at the age of 18, or they lose them when they're younger and they don't get a legal guardian, but maybe they start living with you lose your parents at 16, you start living with your aunt and uncle. Maybe they would become your legal guardian, but you lose your parents at 18, you don't get a new legal guardian that was your legal guardian. And then you're 20, you're trying to book a hotel room, and your only option is to call your parents who are no longer with you. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It's blatant. It's so ridiculous, actually, that you would just require that some 20-year-old that might have cut off contact with their parents, might have lost their parents, might have a whole plethora of reasons that they can't ask their parents or legal guardian for permission to enter a hotel, and they're 20 years old and they can't do it because they are not in contact with their parents. Their parents have passed away. They don't have anyone to contact for whatever reason. So it's ridiculous. It's like, it's almost laughable.
Yeah.
That would be like a thing.
Yeah.
Like it's so stupid to even like require something like that. Mm-hmm. Like your parents have to give you permission. You're a grown adult, but your parents have to give you permission.
Yeah. And it's like that's saying that like you're basically only bound to being able to travel with your parents. Like let's say you and your friends want to go to New York City, you as a 20-year-old and your friends 21, 22, like in most circumstances, like the 22-year-old would just have to be the one like booking the room or something. And then for the 20-year-old, if there's like a limit, but this one, the 20-year-old couldn't even check into the room without their parents' consent. So so they're saying that like you're only allowed to travel with your parents. Like, and think about it like this, like people, like anyone who lost their parents of like, cause like you don't get a legal guardian. Like if your parents, like you literally don't get one. If your parents die when you're like 18 or over 18, you don't get new ones. You don't get a new legal guardian. You don't go to the foster care system. You don't get put in there. So orphaned young adults are functionally barred from booking a room at this hotel, and former foster youth are barred because let's say your parents die or you get taken away from your parents when you're a minor, once you're 18, you age out of the foster care system. You don't have a legal guardian anymore. You are 18. If you're 18 and 21, you age out of the foster care system. You do not have a legal guardian. If you're an orphaned young adult, you don't get a new legal guardian. You don't have a single living soul on the planet who could be your legal guardian or your parent to sign that. So it's like are you either discriminating against people who lost their parents or people who like were taken away from them and went through the foster care system, which is already a hard enough system, but then now you
Yeah.
literally can't have certain rights or privileges because of the fact that you lost your parents and you're an adult now?
And I'm also thinking about this. If you're over 18, you don't have a legal guardian. Even if you had one when you were 17, you're an adult. You don't need a legal guardian anymore.
Yeah.
Like, legally, yeah, you're biologically, your parents are still your parents, or, like, maybe emotionally they're still your parents, even if it's not biologically, like, that's, like, your parents. But, like, legally, you're an adult. You take care of yourself. You don't have a guardian that takes care of you anymore, that can represent you and all that stuff, because you represent yourself.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a ridiculous thing to think about when you're just thinking about, like, how our like government system works with, like, aging out. You don't have a guardian anymore because you don't need one, because you are an adult. You represent yourself now. They're asking you to, like, stop being an adult.
Yeah.
They're asking you to, like, go back in time, basically, and be 16 again, and need, like, parent permission to go on a field trip.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
It almost sounds like something from, like, a sitcom. It's, like, so ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just, I can't imagine, like, how people genuinely, like, sat there and thought that this was a good idea. This is something, like, honestly, I think the over 21 for everything is kind of ridiculous, but to need parental consent at 20 years old is just so absolutely, like, comical. And I just don't know how it got passed, like, as a decision. Like, they were sitting there and they were like, this is a good idea.
Yeah. And it's not even about, the weird part is it's not about liability. Like, it doesn't say anything in there about, oh, parental, like, liability. Like, there's one hotel that says, okay, your parents have to sign something that says they're taking up liability. But this one, it's not even about liability. It's specifically parental consent for you to be able to stay at the hotel, for you to be able to check in, and be there. Like, it's literally about control. It's like just trying to say that, like, yeah, young people shouldn't even have the right to go anywhere without their parents, or, like, go stay at places independently without their parents. It's literally about control, which is just so strange. Like, why would you do that? It's ridiculous. It's almost like it's a punishment. Like, the person I mentioned earlier who was had the issues with her parents, where CPS failed to intervene to, like, protect her from that. She eventually got into the foster care system after multiple failed attempts of them not intervening. So then she's now 18. So, like, she was taken away because her parents were abusive and toxic, domestic violence, drug abuse, all that. So if she's 18 and she wants to go to New York and book a hotel, they're going to ask for parent consent. It's like she went through the foster care system. Her parents aren't her legal guardians. She doesn't have legal guardians anymore. Like, I mean, technically, I guess the parent could be the one to consent to that, but it's like, that's not going to happen. She's not going to call up her parents and be like, hey, yeah, come sign a consent form for me to stay at a hotel. Like, obviously not. That's obviously not going to happen. So it's like you're trying to punish young people for not, like, being part of, like, the traditional family of, like, oh yeah, you still are in contact with your parents. Like, if anything deviates, like, if you don't want to be in contact with your parents because of whatever happened in your past, or, like, you physically can't because either they're dead or you got taken away from them or anything, it's like you're punishing young people for that. And it's like, that's such just a ridiculous thing that this hotel does.
Yeah, and it's kind of back to what you said earlier. It wants to keep this narrative of children as property. And it's not a narrative that, like, lately it does seem like people are trying to push back. And it goes back to limiting that autonomy, because if you're property, if you are your parents' property, then you don't have personal autonomy. You are, like, basically an object. You just do what you're told.
Yeah.
And it's definitely ridiculous when someone's already an adult. It's ridiculous for minors, but it's absolutely ridiculous to hear someone over 18 having to go through that.
Yeah.
And it's, like, completely legal. It's crazy to me how people are just thinking that this is okay and not a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just weird, like, some of these things that for them to institute some of these policies. And I feel like a lot of the times they don't actually think about the implications of it. Like, they don't think of the implication of, oh yeah, parental consent before 21. Like, they don't actually think of the fact that orphans and former foster youth are functionally barred from booking a room with them. They don't actually they don't sit down. They think it's so weird because it's so commonly accepted for young people to be discriminated against, like with so many things. And it's also the idea of like pushing adulthood up. It's like you turn 18, you think you're an adult now, you have adult privileges, but they push it up further. It's like you can't rent a car, you can't drink, you can't book a room at a hotel. So it's like they've been like increasing adulthood recently with so many different like things that should be adult privileges that now they're just denying adults from being able to have, which is just very discriminatory because it's like socially acceptable to discriminate against young people. Like you won't see a policy saying that like any other demographic of people aren't allowed to do this certain thing. But with young people it's okay. And then when policies act like this is okay, they make it to where more and more pop up like it. Like if our young people already aren't allowed to book a hotel room or rent a car, they're gonna be like, okay, now you can't do this, now you can't do that, and that's just what young people have to go through, and it's ridiculous that they have to go through that, and that literally even when you're an adult, the age of adulthood is being pushed up.
And it's something that I think is a like greater society we're all kind of ignoring, but that the age of adulthood is being pushed up slowly through all these like what seem like very minor and irrelevant things. It's pushing young people's ability to use their personal rights.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And it's crazy how I feel like all the issues that we talk about really go back to this one narrative of just like limiting the right, well obviously, but like limiting systematically the right of like being represented properly and like representing your rights and using your rights and representing yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I really think it's just this way that young people are just systematically seen as less than. They don't deserve these rights. They don't deserve these privileges. Society allows businesses and people and like parents just kind of just push people down and like to like bind young people to their parents. And, they really just ignore all these other aspects of these safety concerns of like, what if you're trying to escape an abusive home, but you can't because you're young? Like, what if you are on a road trip because you're an independent 20-year-old and you can't get a hotel because they won't let you? Like, it's really just a lack of forethought, and it really just reflects the way that young people's concerns are just not at all taken seriously, and that it's just so acceptable to push them down like that. But, I think it's been about almost an hour. We can probably go ahead and wrap up pretty soon. Is there any like last thoughts they want to give about, the hotel booking age and how this relates to other systematic youth rights issues?
I think that it goes back to that lack of forethought that you said. Large part of that, it's lack of forethought of how these can put people in dangerous situations, but it's a lack of understanding that not all parents are good. Not every child has loving parents that are going to put their safety first and put their health first. Sometimes people are in dangerous situations, and sometimes that applies to young adults too. People from 18 to 21 to 25, that age range, they're limited even though they're considered adults. They're very limited, and it goes to a greater issue that we have in our society.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening in. And, I'm going to be posting a whole webpage about hotel booking age and specifically about that one Midtown West Hotels policy about how orphans and former foster youth are functionally barred from booking a room there. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening in. And if you all have any ideas for any other episodes, leave it in the comments. Bye-bye, everyone.